An 1811 article in the British Classical Journal identified Rohingya as one of 3 languages spoken in the Burma Empire. The collection of languages published in 1815 by German professor J.S. Vader included an entry for Rohingya, noting the existence of the Rohingya ethnic group and its distinct language. Myanmar argues that there are no other similar historical sources that refer to the Rohingya as such. This fails to refute the fact that these specific sources did exactly that. At a minimum, these sources document the fact that the Rohingya referred to themselves as such going all the way back to the end of the 18th century. Myanmar also argues that most of this population immigrated to Myanmar during the British colonial period, which began in the mid-19th century. While it may be the case that some populations moved into this region over time, the historical record makes clear that the Rohingya had been present as a group in this region for 3 centuries. The historical record also shows that after Burma's independence in 1948, its political and military leaders recognized the Rohingya as a distinct ethnic group. The first Prime Minister, U Nu, made the following statement in a 1954 radio address. Quote, "The people living in Mongdo and Buthodong regions are our nationals, our brethren. They are called Rohingyas. They are one of the same par in status of nationality with Kachin, Kya, Karen, Mon, Rakhine, and Shan. They are one of the ethnic races of Burma." End quote. As noted in the IIMM Rohingya report, Prime Minister U Nu's administration had Rohingya government ministers and parliamentary secretaries. There was a Rohingya Students' Association in the University of Rangoon. And in 1961, there was a Rohingya language radio broadcast on the public radio station of the Burma Broadcasting Service. In the early years after Burma's independence, there was an armed insurgency of Rohingya who sought to separate northern Rakhine State from Burma and join what was then called East Pakistan, or present-day Bangladesh. The Burmese army quashed that insurrection, whose fighters were referred to as Mujahideen. In July 1961, during the so-called Mujahid Insurgent Surrender Ceremony, Burma's Vice Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, Brigadier General Aung Gyi, delivered a speech identifying the Rohingya as an ethnic group in Burma. His speech is at Annex 143 of the memorial. In relevant part, General Aung Gyi said the following, quote, "In central Burma, there are people who hold the view that people in this region are not Tai Yin Tha, or ethnic group native to the Union of Burma. These are false views. I want to openly and publicly tell you this. We consider the Rohingya people of Mayu district an ethnic minority integral to the Union of Burma. Let me be very precise about this. Those of you here ought to view yourselves as an ethnic minority of Burma. Only then will peace prevail in this region and in this country of ours." End quote. He went on to recognize the legitimate grievances of the Rohingya that had led to the insurgent movement in the first place, and declared that the persecution of the past was ending. Quote, "They said the Mujahideen rebellion broke out because of religious persecution. They said there was economic persecution. They said there was racial persecution. Yes, they are correct, as these rationales and explanations were true to a certain degree before. But that was the past. There is no more racial persecution. For we have emphatically and categorically recognized Rohingyas as an ethnic minority, making efforts for the progress and development of the Rohingya ethnic minority." End quote. Myanmar quotes from his speech in its rejoinder, using its own translation, to argue that General Aung Gyi referred to the Rohingya as the same ethnic group as existed across the border in present-day Bangladesh, and not as a distinct ethnic group in Myanmar. I will address the argument about the distinctiveness of the group shortly, but what is important is that Myanmar concedes that General Aung Gyi used the term Rohingya to refer to the Muslim majority population of present-day northern Rakhine State. Unfortunately, the commitment to recognition and inclusion and an end to persecution referred to in these speeches, the very same demands that the Rohingya have to this very day, did not hold true. Those who sought to exclude the Rohingya from the country soon regained power. In 1962, a military coup ousted the civilian government, and there began a long process of systematic persecution and discrimination against and exclusion of the Rohingya, extending and enlarging over the next several decades. This eventually culminated in the genocidal clearance operations of 2016 to 2018. Ms. Pasipanocha will go into further detail on the history of discrimination as one of the indicators of Myanmar's genocidal intent. I will now address why the Rohingya are plainly a protected group within the meaning of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. Article 2 defines genocide as any of the acts listed therein that are, quote, committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. As articulated in Bosnia v. Serbia, the court has defined a group for purposes of the Genocide Convention as, quote, a collection of people who have a particular group identity, end quote, that is defined by, quote, positive characteristics, national, ethnical, racial, or religious, end quote, which can be identified through a, quote, combined subjective-objective approach, end quote. The key objective factors include distinguishing well-established or immutable characteristics, such as language, religion, citizenship, or hereditary physical characteristics. The key subjective factors include self-identification, perceived characteristics, and socio-historic context. Myanmar argues that these ethnical, racial, or religious characteristics must be such that the group is, quote, distinct from the rest of the world's population. There is no basis in the court's jurisprudence for this extreme position, which seems more motivated by Myanmar's desire to deny the existence of the Rohingya group than an effort to reasonably address the court's standard for defining the group under the convention. There is also no basis in the court's jurisprudence to apply, as Myanmar seeks to do, a high standard of proof applicable to findings of genocide to the identification of the group at issue. As the court made clear in Bosnia, all that is necessary is that the positive and objective characteristics of the group are such that it would enable the court to, quote, have in mind the identity of the group against which genocide may be considered to have been committed, end quote. The identity of the Rohingya group is clear. First, the Rohingya are rightly considered as an ethnical group given their language, culture, self-identification, and their identification as such by Myanmar and the United Nations. Clear evidence indicates that the Rohingya group speaks a common language, namely the Rohingya language. As noted, British and German ethnographic documentation from 1799, 1811, and 1815 refer to the Rohingya language as being spoken by Rohingya in Burma. Furthermore, A 2018 report from the NGO Translators Without Borders found that among Rohingya refugees surveyed, all, quote, said that they speak Rohingya, with 99% of them saying it is their primary language at home, end quote. That it is the, quote, only spoken language that all Rohingya refugees understand and prefer, end quote. Myanmar has not challenged this evidence. Rather, Myanmar argues that the Gambia has not established that the Rohingya speak a language not shared by others in the Chittagong division in Bangladesh. That is not something that the Gambia is required to prove. The fact that the Rohingya share this specific language is a positive characteristic that helps to establish their identity as an ethnical group. As the Gambia noted in the memorial, the Rohingya language is related to the Chittagonian dialect of Bangla and considered by anthropologist Dr. Pras Freeman to be a different dialect, one that the Rohingya view as central to their ethnic identity. Even Myanmar has noted the Rohingya's shared language in defining the group for purposes of its first report on implementation of the court's order on provisional measures. In that document, Myanmar noted that members of the group, quote, speak an Indo-European tongue, which is a variant of or is closely related to the Chittagonian dialect, end quote. The Rohingya also share a common culture. As discussed in the memorial, the Rohingya's shared culture includes communal organization around a mosque or group of mosques, an emphasis on family and community, and their own music, art, poetry, and foods.